Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts, in the shadow of the Great Blue Hills. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids, teachers, principals, and librarians. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Himalaya, Ghana, Podcast Addict, Good Pod, wherever you find your podcast. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Missing Red Envelopes, a fun middle grade novel by our friend Yobi Q. As the Lunar New Year approaches, two Asian American girls from New York City eagerly anticipate the festive celebrations, from watching the vibrant parade to indulging in delicious Asian cuisine and cherishing precious family moments. The highlight of the occasion is receiving lucky red envelopes filled with surprises from their relatives. However, excitement turns to mystery when Weena realizes she's lost all of the red envelopes. What in the world will they do? Encourage readers to dive into the story, celebrate cultural diversity, and enjoy a heartwarming adventure with The Missing Red Envelopes by our friend Yobi Q. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Junior Miles and the Junkman, great middle grade novel written by Kevin Carey. Junior and his family live in a junkyard where his father creates pieces of art from the junk surrounding them. When Junior's father falls ill and dies, Junior and his mom are left with few resources other than what his mother brings home from her job as a waitress. The junkyard is threatened by encroaching development, and just when Junior thinks all is lost, he finds that a junk sculpture of a man gifted to him by his father begins to speak to him. The junk man provides advice in the form of enigmas. Are they clues, or is it just nonsense? Junior and his best friend Isaac embark on a journey to find out. Can a man made of junk parts teach Junior about art and friendship and overcoming the loss of a loved one? Only if Junior believes it can. This is a really wonderful middle grade novel. You and your kids would love it. Check it out today. Junior Miles and the Junkman by Kevin Carey. I'm really excited. We have two amazing guests for us today. First, returning to the podcast, joining us from Long Island in New York. Please welcome back to the show, Jessica Gold. Jessica, how are you?
Oh my gosh, Jed, it's such an honor to be here. I mean, I'm doing great. I am living the dream, basically, of being able to write and get the books out there and celebrate a little bit of the creativity I've always wanted to do. So I'm happy to be here. And I have my wonderful illustrator with me today, too, which is a gift.
Absolutely. Yes, we are celebrating the winner at Being Me, the latest book from Jessica's imagination. And joining us from Louisville in Kentucky, the illustrator Brian Werts. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Jed? I'm really good here. Yeah, just excited to be on the podcast and share this with Jessica. And yeah, I mean, I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, why don't we start by asking you what the winner at Being Me is all about, please?
Oh, absolutely. I guess I'm a teacher, and I've been a teacher for 32 years, and what I've seen is children really trying to find themselves. Everyone has a gift. Everyone has a talent. I guess I actually just want to start with the opening, the dedication I had. I started with, there's a hidden talent in every child. Seek to find it, nurture it, and guide it. And I dedicated this book to our teachers out there who aspire. And I've seen firsthand teachers create their magic and bring out the gifts that children don't even realize that they have. And the winner of Being Me was a concept of watching students around 10 years old. I guess that's the age I kind of have taught and focus on, really trying to find their gift. They take dance lessons, sports, baseball teams, art classes, everything else, music. What's their gift? What are they trying to find? And the protagonist in this book, which Brian captured so incredibly well, is seeking to find himself in a family that's extremely talented in sports. The brother's a football player. The dad was a star baseball. The mommy's even good at bowling. They all are trying to encourage him to go their direction. And this child is really struggling. He loves everything he's doing. He just doesn't feel like anything is his gift. And that's the thing. He's trying to find himself.
Yeah. Boy, that brings back some memories, some not difficult memories, hard memories. My son and my daughter, awesome young adults right now, very successful, very happy. Growing up, they were not, I was going to say polar opposites, but they had a lot of differences. My daughter was that person who was laser focused on dance and being a dancer. And from the age of 2.5, she was so mobile, we kind of lied and fibbed and said she was 4 when she was 2.5, and we got her into a dance class, and somehow everybody bought it. And she was like that until she was 18, and she just had this passion in something that she loved, and it really was something that brought her a lot of joy. My son, on the other hand, there was a lot of things that he loved, but nothing that he was kind of focused in on. And I think that there were a lot of times when he, I don't know if it was jealous or felt that we weren't getting, it was different and it was difficult. And so, I do remember those years. Brian, how did you, as an illustrator, I get kind of, drawing kids playing baseball and dancing,
Sure.
but it's a little bit more different, getting out that emotion into the illustrations. How do you approach that? I'm hoping I'm framing that as an English question.
And of course, every project is different when I get involved with these authors, and I'll start by obviously, kind of ingesting their manuscript, and then start with the protagonist or the main character, because in a lot of these children's books that I do, there's always like that central character that the story kind of revolves around to teach that lesson. And for instance, with this young man, I usually go to coffee shops. I'll go out into the world and I'll sit and sketch for a little while, and then I'll bring that back to the digital space and refine everything. With this one in particular, I was just out and about at my local coffee shops, and I see moms and dads with their kids coming and going, and so I'll do many different sketches and then kind of go from there. And with this young man, I found him pretty quick. And then, the tousled hair, and they gave the whole family kind of that blonde feel, and just kind of went with it from there. A lot of my illustrations come from, again, going back to the retro thing we had spoken about previously, Warner Brothers, Hanna-Barbera, things like that I grew up on. So my characters kind of take that on a little bit. And then I just play with facial expressions and emotions, and as I go through each page of the book, I try to find that in the character in each section.
Yeah.
Hope that answers your question.
Hanna-Barbera, boy, I spent hours and hours and hours watching those cartoons. It was so much fun, and it seemed, and I don't watch a lot of cartoons these days, but I don't know, Brian, you'd be able to tell me more. Those cartoons just seemed richer. There was much more going on. There was a lot of, these days it's like you get the main character or the two main characters and they move, but the backgrounds are all the same. The Hanna-Barbera, there was wind blowing and all this stuff that you wouldn't even notice.
Yeah, and I like to feel that there wasn't a whole ton of, now we have like this just treasure trove of content everywhere on the internet and everywhere else. And there's so much for people to draw from, when back then there were only I'm not going to say a handful. There were still a lot of influences for animators, cartoonists, and things like that. But I really feel like they got into their own imaginations back then and came up with these characters and scenarios and things of that nature. And then, of course, that led me to, and not just Hanna-Barbera, but the Saturday morning cartoon 80s kid is what I was. And so, like, Schoolhouse Rock and things like that were also
rocks.
big influence on me, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, no, but I feel exactly what you're saying. Scooby-Doo, and the gang and Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear. I mean, I could go on and on with the Hanna-Barbera, but I grew up on it, watched it in syndication. The Flintstones was huge when I was younger, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am a huge Bugs Bunny fan, and I know they're coming out with, there's a new modern day Bugs Bunny out there, but it just ain't the same. I don't know.
I agree.
I'm
totally with you there.
Yeah. Jessica, you were sharing with me before we started recording that you've been a teacher for over 3 decades, and
yes.
and you're saying that you're seeing kids that are struggling with self-esteem, struggling to find themselves. Is that something that you notice throughout your career, or is it something that you're noticing more and more these days?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I've loved every aspect of teaching. I think you teach to reach. I've taught 1,600 children, I figured out over the weekends. 1,600 children. I've had middle school experiences where I've had hundreds, virtual where I've had hundreds, and then in a classroom. I don't know. Now I'm at the age where my own kids are 20 and 14, and I think I'm looking back, retrospectively on youth and how it's changed, but I think there's a commonality in everything, that everyone is looking to find that self-esteem piece that makes them feel good about themselves. I don't think it's changed as dynamically. I do think social media has influenced it a lot more, that in a good way and a bad way. I think a lot of it needs to return to the old-fashioned playing outside and, talking with your friends and socializing and playing a good baseball game on the field, or a good soccer game, and then the self-esteem kind of takes off as you feel like you're part of something. I just think every kid needs to find something that they're part of, whether it's inside school, outside school, something creative, something musical, something athletic, just a hobby and interest. I also think scouts are great, just to find something that they can just latch onto, that they feel good about themselves. My daughter is joined the School of Rock, just a plug for them. They're amazing. She's an electric guitar player right now at 14. She loves it, and she's singing. My son was the athlete. Now he's a rugby player at his college. He found his thing through sports. My daughter finds it more creatively. Yeah. And I think that they just have to find that motivator. It doesn't necessarily have to cost a dime. You could find motivation just by going outside to a park and hiking. You could find others who hike, others who walk, others who walk their dog, join a dog walking group. I just think that they need to kind of get off the social media as much as they're on it, and have an even keel of being, interactive and doing something fun for themselves.
Well, Jessica, you bring up a point. As I was talking to Brian about the differences in cartoons and pointing out that, in a lot of the modern day cartoons, the background is kind of static and there's not a whole lot going on there. And you were mentioning social media, and kids are spending so much time on social media, and, they're in, for a lot of kids, they're in their bedroom, or they're in their living room, but they're in this place where there's not a whole lot going on. It's the same 4 walls that they're surrounded by. Unlike when I was a kid growing up in the city and you're trying to play stickball on the street, and, you have, someone's watching out for the cars so you don't get run over, and you need to dodge, the potholes and the people coming out from the stores, and you have all these other things going on. The background around us was so full. And
can I just interject for a second? Brian and I, our next book coming out has to deal with a grandfather teaching his grandson how to play stickball.
Yes.
And in exchange, the grandson is teaching the grandfather how to come to his generation. So it's funny that you mentioned that. What a connection, because that's our next project coming out through Pen and Publications. Yeah.
Well, this is something I want to explore from a book business angle. Brian, one of the things we hear, especially from books and authors and illustrators that are working on books that are traditionally published by the big, giant publishing houses, is they tell me, and I was very surprised to hear, that the illustrators and authors of those projects, they don't have much of any interaction during the creation process. You know, the editor, the art director will give the project, the manuscript to the illustrator and say, have at it. And the author's just kind of sitting back and they don't see things until the book is born. You're doing something a little bit, you're more, working with Jessica. Is that something that you prefer?
Absolutely. I feel like the communication between the illustrator and the author, because I mean, there are plenty of authors that do both, right? And in this case, with me, a lot of times I work directly with the author. And then, having that communication, that back and forth, especially as you're going through each page of the book, I always say, I want to help them bring that vision they've got in their head as much as they can out on that page. Now, I know my artistic style will be there, my influence will be there, but I think that's really important. And I haven't been in that space that you're talking about, but I did work as a media specialist for about 4 years in downtown Louisville, where we created kind of online media pieces for online classes and stuff like that. And that was a lot of the same thing, where you're just getting the information from these people, from your creative director, and then just everybody, they grade everything, and you never have that direct interaction with the instructors who put that together. So I see exactly what you're saying there, and I think it's really important, especially if that author has a specific goal in mind of what they want. Maybe the creative director or whatever won't communicate that as well as the two people can when they're speaking. And I mean, a lot of email threads with authors that you see the little number pop up, 30, 40, 50 emails in that thread, just going back and forth to make sure we iron out everything the way they want it. Yeah.
Jessica, being an author is so much different than being a teacher, but I think there's probably a lot of similarities as well. Can you talk a little bit about some of the similarities now that you're thinking about moving out of the classroom and really focusing on teaching through your books and creative endeavors?
Sure. Thank you. I guess the ideas stem from the classroom, just my observations of students and seeing what they need. I mean, the 4 books that I have out now are all self-esteem connected books, trying to help students reach for the stars, basically. And that's what I do as a teacher in the classroom. You try every day. The ones you hear from years later are the ones that needed you the most. And it's very moving to say that, because my oldest class is 31 years old. I still get invited to baby showers. I still get invited to weddings. I get notified when they get their jobs. I hear from a nice handful that keep in touch with me over the years, and the moms as well. And that, to me, is the biggest lesson in life, that I touched a life with education. I was able to bring them to a place for their next journey, basically, and gave them the time in the classroom. It wasn't all about the curriculum. It was about maybe connecting on something. I knew about their brothers and sisters. I knew who had a new baby. I knew whose family was going out to dinner with the cousins. You started to make nice connections. I think as an author, every time I hear that someone's read my book, I kind of envision them curled up with a blanket, a mother and a child, or a father and a grandparent with a child sitting there reading it, making a connection. And that's what the goal of, I think, an author, an illustrator, a host right now, podcast host, reading with the kids. Why are we here? We all want the families to take that journey with their child through a story or a book. Yeah. And it could be just quite an adventure if they let themselves just enjoy it. And maybe from it can come a discussion. Maybe from it can come a sketch. Maybe from it can come a child creating their own book. If you give them a blank book after reading a book, they can create their own book. Yeah. And, that's the connection with it. So the teacher in me has wanted to be the author forever.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, Jessica's talking about helping kids, develop that self-esteem, find that thing that they love. A lot of kids out there are dreaming of being an illustrator, dreaming of, making a living, creating paintings and whatnot. What advice would you give to kids or parents who want to support their kids who have that dream of being an illustrator?
Yeah, so the first thing I always tell any kids, because I do a lot of these conventions where I'll speak directly to kids of all different ages, and there's always inevitable a few different kids that come up and man, I really want to do something like this, or my kid, you're so good at art, listen to what he has to say. And I'll always tell them, like, the number one thing you can do, draw, practice that art constantly. There are many different ways to do it, but as long as each day, and it's kind of the mantra of my BW Creations is my LLC I put together. And I say, create something every day, whether it's a small doodle or you're doing a huge project. You've got to stay on top of it and just keep at it, because that will build, not only your skill, but your confidence, and just keep that passion kind of alive. Because if you let it stagnate for too long, then maybe, it's harder to get back into later, or that self-confidence kind of starts to linger. So as far as anything creative, I think, especially illustration, you gotta just draw every day and create every day. And then, there are many different, methods you can do. For instance, just what I did, when I was a kid, I was inspired by the 80s movie Pete's Dragon. That was the first character I did. And my mom was like, you should keep this up. And, she inspired me and influenced me the whole way through. And then later on, I kind of got out of it, but then I got back into it again later in life, really zeroing in on the fact that I wanted to do this. I wanted to get serious about it. And so put myself back in school, took a digital design class. I was kind of headed in the computer direction because I was always good with computers. But yeah, and I just chased it. Even though I got off the path a few times, I kind of kept that nugget of creating, whether I was drawing, playing some role-playing games as a kid, like Dungeons and Dragons and things of this nature. I was always creating something. And I just tell them to keep that alive and don't lose that, it's kind of probably been said a ton of times, but you keep that inner kid kind of going. Don't lose them either, because that's where the original spark came from to begin with. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Jessica, you were sharing with us that you have a new project that you're working on with Brian. Can you just give us a little bit of more of a sneak preview of that?
Sure. I think the two that I'm working with Brian have my heart. The Winner Being Me was something that was in my brain for forever. And to see Brian bring it to life, his illustrations blew me away, I have to be honest. So if any author out there is looking for an illustrator, please reach out to Brian. They blew me away the first time I saw them. I was in tears how much it captured what I was saying. So the next story is called Priceless. And I sent it to Brian, and Brian immediately was like, wow, I have this in my mind. I can't wait to get started on this. We're both with Pennant Publications, and then we all both do our private work. But this is through Pennant. Priceless just was something that I had in my heart. I never knew my grandparents, and my children are blessed to have my in-laws. When they see them, it's a wonderful time. I like learning about different generations. My husband is a big history buff, so he likes that bridge and that connection for another generation to our current generation. Always talking about it, always commenting on it. I just visualized in my head, even though a cell phone is something so random and everyone uses it now, the older generation doesn't like them. They don't want to use them. And I just visualized a little grandson hanging out with his grandfather with a big 70-year gap between them. How do they connect? They found a lot in common. They started talking when they're sitting in a porch swing. Oh my gosh, my favorite pizza place was this when I went to the stadium with my parents and watched the ball game. And the grandson high-fives the grandfather. My mom takes me to pizza when we go to the stadium to watch a ball game. And they started finding things in common, but then it started to end where the boy got a text to go play video games with his friends, and he had to make a choice of hanging out with his grandpa or going off with his friends to play video games. He cherished the moment with his grandpa, and the grandpa said, he actually turned to the grandpa and said, can you tell me something about when you were a boy? And the grandfather said, I used to play stickball. And he said, do you want to learn about it? And again, the phone beeped, and the grandson, the grandfather's like, do you want to go play with your friends with the video games? He's like, no, grandpa, I want to learn from you. And the grandpa got a big stick and they learned how to play stickball. But in the same breath, the grandfather, the grandmother, and the daughter had gone out shopping. And the grandfather's like, all right, can you teach me how to text grandma that I want ice cream? And the grandson's like, Grandpa, it's a text. And the grandfather's like, I mean, I've had this phone, but I don't know how to text. I don't use it. So the grandson turns around and teaches the grandfather how to text, and the grandma's amazed that he joined the generation. She's a current with the grandma. He's more of a back in the past kind of grandpa. And when he texts the grandma with the help of the grandson, the grandma's like, oh my gosh, like he joined this. And she winds up bringing home ice cream. But in the end, the grandfather and the grandson, even though he's in Florida, they have a connection. They go back and forth with, will you teach me to make an egg cream like you did in Brooklyn? And the grandfather's like, well, only if you teach me how to play that game like you do with your friends. So they formed a bridge. And Brian captured that. I can't even describe the illustrations. They're so amazing and so on point of the actual, what I visualized of them sitting there in a porch swing, hunting for a stick to play ball with. I just think that I want to try to do more books where it brings connections for different generations.
Wonderful.
And that's what Brian is actually helping me with. We have one independent project that we're working on together that, is very current with social media, and we want to show that they have to be careful with it. So that's our next project together as well.
Well, I'm really excited. Brian, we should tell everybody where we can go to find out more about all of the work that you're creating.
Yes, I tend to stick to, right now I'm working through, like, my Wix site is okay, but I need to get the domain up and running for that. But on social media, I use Facebook. You can find Brian Werts out there on Facebook and Brian Werts BW Creations on Instagram. Pretty easy to find. You can look that up.
And Jessica, where can we go to find out more about you and find out more about the winner at Being Me?
Thank you. I have an Instagram as well, Jessica Gold Author. In addition, I've just registered with a society here on Long Island to actually be able to go to schools and do book talks. But I'm offering virtual and in-person book talks starting after February 7th. And I want to have more out there. I'd love to go to different states. And Brian, if you'd love to join me, I would love to have you aboard on this.
Oh, we might be able to do that.
Yeah, we might be able to link up and do that. But I'd love to go out there and do book talks as an author, possibly as an illustrator along with me, to schools to get the works out there. So my email is jessgoldauthor@gmail.com. And Brian and I really would love to do more for the kids. We're both out there with the same purpose. Yep. And we're both out there with our 80s connection right now. Hanna-Barbera, I was a big Flintstone fan, School of Rock. And Jed, as always, it's just an honor to be on your show and for you to help us get out there and promote reading for children, because it's the biggest gift you can give your kids.
Well, that is the perfect place to end this conversation. We've had a great time speaking to the author and the illustrator of The Winner at Being Me. Our guests have been Brian Werts, the illustrator, and Jessica Gold, the author. My friends, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jen.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast and will join us for the next exciting, informative, and entertaining episode of the show. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we'll start by thanking our amazing guest. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Kyoko Ito, Nick Warner, Sydney Swan, Kayla Newland, Kristen Barrett, Hannah Rose. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.